Hello, we're going to start. They said be informal, so we're going to do it. Unless you're not ready. You ready? Fine. So the title of this panel is Baptized Boards and Bulls, and we'll explain why in a minute. And I want to kind of set up what we want to talk about. We're going to ask some general questions. I'm going to ask some questions specifically of the panelists. If you guys are interested enough, we're going to have Q&A. That'll be up to you. But there are people out here in the room right now who are, if you're in our business at least, and in marketing, spent hours trying to figure out what makes your company and what you do different than everyone else's. And it's my belief, and this is what the premise I'm putting forth, that the one real discernible difference, the difference that you can quantify, although it's difficult to grab and figure out what it is that differentiates one agency and one company from another, isn't some black box voodoo magic, and it's not a mission statement necessarily on your wall or even a widget, but I am proposing that the difference is culture. And that there is a link between an agency's culture, a company's culture, how they perform in the real world, and that's the thing that you can say makes you unlike the agency or company or business across the street, even if you're in the same business or industry. Today we're going to share some of the thinking about culture, how we think about it in our various industries and the businesses we work in, and how that culture impacts the people who work there. So, but first, I want to introduce the panel. To my left, your right, this is the baptized in the Baptized Boards and Bulls. Kristen Cavallo is the CEO of the Martin Agency, and I'm not going to read what's already in I'm the paraphrase. Doesn't make sense. You have it. You can read. But she's the CEO of the Martin Agency. She spent her career between Richmond and Boston. It stints primarily at MullenLowe and at the Martin Agency. Since she's taken on the reins of Martin less than 5 months ago, she's eliminated all pay discrepancies between men and women. She has doubled the female representation on the leadership group, and she's establishing a culture of the agency of transparency and trust, which is sorely needed at the agency, assuming most of you know the news of the past few months. And she's climbed Mount Kilimanjaro with her son Matt over there. Enough said. Welcome, Kristen. Boards. Josée Larocque has been part of the culture of Burton snowboarding for a long time. In fact, she has started her career in Burton in Vermont when Bill Clinton was in office. She's focused on growing Burton's direct business by leveraging a global operations and marketing experience in Europe, Asia, and North America. And yes, she is a snowboarder. Josée Larocque. Finally, the Bull. Perry Fair is the head of partnerships at Red Bull Media House. In his career, Perry has led the title of president, CCO, CDO, not all at Red Bull. And I'm guessing he's far from adding titles. He helped start the agency True, the magazine Trace, a startup named Walter for JWT, and has also written and sold a full-length feature film entitled The Four Horsemen. And I'm guessing Perry is the conquest of the Four Horsemen. Perry Fair. And the final B is for black. That's me. I'm Danny Robinson, and it's also Perry. I work at the Martin Agency as well. That's all I'll say about that. So you can find a lot of definitions for the word culture, and if you ask enough people, you'll get a lot of different definitions for that word. As it relates to this topic, I'm going to paraphrase a definition that I found that I like, that for me summarizes really clearly what culture is as it relates to working at companies in particular. Culture guides discretionary behavior, and it picks up where the employee handbook leaves off. Employees make hundreds of decisions on their own every day, and culture is their guide. Culture tells us what to do when the CEO is not in the room, which is most of the time. It's not what's written, usually, but it's the way you behave, the way you act when the person who is in charge of the company or in charge of your job isn't watching you. That's my definition. There are hundreds of definitions. I think they're all about the same and are in the same space. We're going to talk about culture as it relates to agencies, culture at Burton as it relates to companies, and then culture at Red Bull, and also culture because Perry is in part a definition of culture. Red Bull actually defines culture a little bit differently than we do. So we'll do that. Enough of me talking. So I'm going to ask a general question to the panel, then we're going to get specific. And I'll start with Josée, because she doesn't want me to. Is your company culture something that is written down? Does it appear anywhere tangibly? Or is it like Patrick Swayze in Ghost? You know it. It's there. You can't really touch it unless you're Whoopi Goldberg.
Right. All right. You guys can hear me? All right. I think for the longest time, I started a long time ago at Burton, and for the longest time, we were all about snowboarding, only snowboarding, and really being a core-driven organization and a sport. And when we hired people, or when I was hired, it was all about, do they get it? It was this elusive, they either get it or they don't. 5+ years ago, we kind of decided that our culture was a little bit, even longer ago, actually, we found it a little bit homogeneous, and we said we need to do something to make sure that we can reach out to diverse people and really become a culture that is inclusive and accepting of a lot of different kind of people, especially our employees. So we put something down on paper. We call it the stance. It doesn't define the culture by any means, but it definitely helps us look for some values that are things we want to promote and things that seem to be common across the whole organization. And we also make commitments to each other. So it's about being a high-performance culture, being very results-driven, being inclusive, really wanting to be a part of the fun that is what we also sell every day. So I think that it's still something that we just have to feel. We promote it through traditions and rituals that have been going on forever, but it did help to have something written down.
How about you, Perry, at Red Bull? Is that on paper? Do people kind of know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The mentality at Red Bull is actually our tagline. It's Red Bull gives you wings. So it is not ingrained. It's literally the foundation of the company. It's in the gym that is free for the employees to go work out. It's in the runs that we do for nonprofit organizations. It's in the films that we create that celebrate expression or music or the arts or just simply walking the halls. It is literally the ethos of the organization. It's more than just our tagline. It is the belief that runs completely through, from the receptionist, from the parking lot at the valet guy, all the way to the CEO. So everyone there is there to celebrate not only expression for the brand, but expression for the things that they're passionate about, which we also celebrate.
I can ask you, I know the answer, is Martin, culture tangible, written? Can you hand it to someone to read, or is it in the ether?
Perry lost me at concierge and paid gym for employees. Because now I'm like, oh, why don't we have that? I think it's hard for agencies because we make our money defining someone else's brand. And we don't want to be a one-trick pony, so we make money defining lots of different brands. And I think it's easy to lose sight of yourself when you're so busy trying to make Geico, or Benjamin Moore, or Oreo, because they should see those brands and not us, per se. Our culture is not written down. Our mission statement is, and our values are. And similar to what Josée was saying, I think the challenge is always to not just hire people that look just like you or the high performers, because then you end up with homogeny. The challenge is to allow for a culture that tolerates and even appreciates dissension. And oftentimes, I think culture tries to remove the bulls in the china shop in order to get more people that are like the stars. But when you do that, I think you inhibit progress. You have to allow for dissension in a way that people don't fear retaliation. And I think that's indicative to me of a strong culture.
Well, so to that point, we often say we're looking for people who are different, and we're trying to get people of different ethnicities and sexual orientation and gender, and we're looking to hire from people who don't live in the country. And so we want this diversity of employees, and we want people to bring their cultures with them. I mean, we have a design staff of people from Brazil. Different culture than Richmond, Virginia, if you might not have guessed that. So how do you bring that into an organization, people who are different, and then ask them to be of the same culture of the organization? How do you allow this to stretch and bend in that way?
Back to me. I think it's really challenging because I think oftentimes we'll do a great job recruiting, and then we drop you in and we leave you, and then you have to fend for yourself. And I think whenever you hire someone who doesn't fit the mold, you need to back them up with an enormous amount of support. I think praise is the most underutilized form of compensation we can ever give. I can give people money and it only satisfies them for a short period of time. I can give them an extra week of vacation. They may not use it wisely. But if I walk around and tell people that I'm blown away by an idea that I saw Perry create, or I'm blown away by something that Danny's done, or this ad made me cry, or that thing made me feel something, or this was super smart, I think it goes a long way in building a culture that allows and appreciates differences. So for me, I use praise.
I would second the culture of recognition has become so important in our company because we are family owned and we work and feel like a family no matter where you go, Europe or Asia. But families can also be really tough on each other and really expect maybe sometimes a little bit too much. So we have had to work really hard on being a culture of positive recognition.
Yeah, I would say the same things as well. The thing that I do love about Red Bull is when I got there, my first day, I was walked through my first 100 days. And it wasn't, here are your expectations. It's, here's how we're going to help you be successful at Red Bull. Wow. And then there's Red Bull College, which happens twice a year. And every employee goes through it. And it's a celebration of not only the brand, but how special you guys, how special the people are. And you go and do these amazing activities and sign all these legal forms to do that. That help you not only understand what Red Bull means in the world, but how you as an individual fit into the culture of being an individual. And then the thing I do love is that you walk the halls and there are so many Austrian accents because Red Bull is also headquartered in Austria. And there is a massive effort to make sure that you don't see one office versus another. You see one brand all the time. It's never, this is what Austria wants you to do. It's about looking at it from a holistic approach and how what we do in the world, from the art festival that we're having in New York this week, which, by the way, is really amazing. You should go to it. To what we're doing in the world with Crashed Ice, which is an event, or Lollapalooza, which is an event that we're a part of as well. So you see the brand all the way through everything that we do, but it's brought to life by the people who we bring into the organization and help them understand that their individuality is accepted.
You guys taking notes about the things your company should bring to? I hope you're taking notes. Yeah. Page Gym, University. Yeah. Sounds good to me. You said something about family. The Netflix culture, aside from some other issues with the Netflix culture, but the Netflix culture is, they say we are not a family. We're a team. Because when you're on a team, if you don't perform, you get cut. They're pretty ruthless about what it takes to work there. There's a great podcast about how they've evolved, and as they've evolved, the most high-performing people get let go because they are no longer in the business of sending DVDs to your house. So anybody who was involved with that, where there's no place, we love you, goodbye. We have a culture of family at our agency as well, and I sometimes wonder, and we often say we're good and tough, I sometimes wonder if that concept is, while nice, and can make for a nice atmosphere, is it the right way to run a business? Is it better to act like the Dallas Cowboys and let you go if your catches are down? We can find somebody else who can catch more passes, or is it a family atmosphere the way to build a culture? And I'll ask that of any of you here.
I mean, I'll say this on the personal level. If you want to know how great a company is, see how they treat their employees. So I look at it as an agency person who's been on that side, and then also on a client side, looking not only internally but also some of the agencies I've worked with. Culture is so important, and we call it fit when you're pitching. Like, oh, they weren't a great fit for us, But I always wake up, and I was having this conversation with one of my employees, and I was like, culture starts with you, like internally. Are you personally, culturally ready to be a part of the organization? Because we want you, but you have to make the decision if you want to be a part of us. And I will plug Red Bull one more time. And I'll say this, because I'm going on like day 45, so I'm like all in the Red Bull glow right now. The thing that I did appreciate, because I'm going through the cultural process with them, which I think this is such a timely panel, was half the people that I met at the organization started in college. So they started off as Red Bull employees in college and then moved into the organization and then moved up through the organization. And it's such a different experience because they really feel ingrained in the brand. They feel like they're a part of a family because it's owned by an individual. So they feel a part of that process all the way through, and they see how what they do at a college level can have an effect on the larger brand, and it's celebrated. So that to me is such a different type of mind space to be in.
So at the risk of stereotyping, I'm not a fan of stereotyping, but influx of millennials, let's use the M word, into the workplaces, we found the need to kind of stretch and change and mold a bit the way companies approach employees. And it's just the desire for life-work balance is higher. Reward doesn't always have to be pay. And that sometimes, and flexible work hours and just employees working remotely. So the culture of that age group and how they come into companies and agencies looking to work is changing. So knowing that, have you seen an impact of this and that on the culture change of your agency, Josée?
Yeah, at Red Bull, we have a lot of young people, and I think we've always been very, they weren't always called millennials, but we've always been very friendly for young people to come into the company. It's very casual. You bring your dogs, you get a pass, you have an opportunity to really make a huge impact in a company like ours. But what we've seen is that the millennials have really pushed the limit on wanting transparency. We've had to make sure that the information is out there, whether it's about the business performance, the strategy, the future of the company, and I would say every person that we hire now wants to know what their path is going to look like and how they're going to be able to contribute. And if they're not feeling like they're able to contribute, they are not happy and they will go somewhere else. So that has made our, just everything we do, whether we talk about our trail map or company meetings or communications, it's had to really raise our game there.
Yeah, I assume Red Bull is fairly young.
No, it's a range.
Okay.
Like there are employees that have been there. I met the guy who's like employee number 12. Like he's still there, and it's awesome because it is a wide range from like the college. I just graduated from college. This is my first job, all the way to I was here at the very beginning, and I love that knowledge bank of experience and being able to pull in all the resources that you have and like all the knowledge of like, oh my God, 20 plus years of information is walking the halls. And they're still active. They're still like everyone contributes. There is no, you haven't been here longer than me, so as long as I have, so what does your opinion matter? Like everything matters when you sit in a meeting. It is like I've sat through one the other day, and I was like, this is amazing. You're like, I'm brand new, but you've been here since the very beginning, and we're having a dialogue about the future of the brand, and my opinion is as valid as yours.
So let's kind of separate agency, organization. I don't know, you're such a hybrid. I don't know what to call it as you do, Perry, but we'll figure it out. So this question's for Kristen. In the ad world, each agency has its culture, and we have our culture, but we are often going and talking to companies that we want to work for who may have a culture that is just very different from ours. So how do agencies reconcile sometimes going and working with people who internally think differently than the agency, and how do you navigate? Or do you just make decisions not to talk to people who are fundamentally culturally different, which would narrow the pool?
Most companies do not place creativity as a core value. So if we only limited ourselves to companies that believed in the exponential power of creativity, we would have a very limited set of clients. So I would say most of our clients have cultures very different than ours, and I would say that is probably true of most ad agencies. I instead look for people who have similar values, and I will say it's not always easy because we spend a lot of time trying to assess whether or not we're going after the right people up front. And I'm a big believer that every brand can have great advertising, but most brands won't and never will because the clients, the people at the company, don't believe in the power of creativity to solve business problems. I'd say maybe 10% of clients believe that creativity can solve business problems. The rest of them believe that creativity has a role, or advertising has a role, but it's not always to solve a business problem. And so I think there are a lot of great agencies all fighting for this same 10% of clients. So and then we have consultants involved that help us to determine when we get into a pitch. But those consultants are very good at knowing what words to use to get agencies to participate in a review. And so unfortunately, it's not until the midterm or the final, when you're actually showing someone a piece of work and they're getting their feedback, that you really grow to understand whether or not they believe in the power of creativity or the power of attention or the power of PR. Because it's only when when we're all talking in theory, it's easy to all be on the same page. But when you're making a choice and you're saying, I'm going to back this ad campaign that does this. Let's imagine you're Geico. We're going to bring a camel in, and we're going to talk about Hump Day, and we're going to do this. And it's in that moment when you understand, does this client believe in this? And we've had a lot of success with unsuspecting clients like Geico. So, what's easy in our industry is to assume we should all pitch the Red Bulls and the Burtons because they're already inherently cool. And let's all stay away from the government employee insurance company because the name alone would suggest that that's not going to be very fun. But in fact, it's the best, one of the best clients in the building. And so I think it is very hard. It's where I spend a lot of my time, to be honest, is trying to assess fit. And trying to ask different questions up front so that we know. But whether or not their culture is exactly like ours matters less to me. What matters more to me is, do they believe what we believe? And for us, we believe when you impact culture, you impact sales, in that order. And so we want clients that want to be a part of culture, that want to be on Ellen or Saturday Night Live or talked about, that have a point of view on a controversial subject. I celebrate those brands when they're not mine. When I see, Delta or Dick's or even Chick-fil-A take a stand on something that's not what they sell, I applaud them. And I hope consumers reward their stand with their dollars. Whether that's my stance or not, I think more brands need to take a stand on something other than what they make. And I hope they are rewarded for doing so with consumer dollars, because that kind of bravery is, I think, what we need to help us make decisions, and it's certainly what I think millennials are asking for from companies.
So, Josée, before I had a conversation with you, I was thinking about Burton and what I knew. So having a strong corporate culture is important to help you figure out what kind of employees should be at your company. And what I knew about Burton, I would have thought, let me think of when I was 20-something, if I were interested in Burton, I would think Vermont, it's like, it's cold, so no. Birkenstocks, no. I would have thought snow, and it's white and cold, and I'd say no. I would have thought snowboard, and I said, well, that's white people and cold and snow, and no. I think I would have ruled out Burton for this, a bunch of reasons, but Burton may be the kind of place, could have been the kind of place that would have been great for me. So how do you let those outside of Burton who have a perception of the company understand, and how do you broaden the pool so people think about you and consider you when maybe the perception of you is very narrow?
Right. It's a good question, and I think it's certainly something that we have struggled with. And we're working, I think for one thing, we're very authentic. So we are very true to who we are, and being a family-owned business, being rooted in the mountains in Vermont. We're also in Austria. We're also in Japan. That is very important to us and true to, shows our authenticity. We are trying to get the word out about how much more we are as a culture. We are a place that has, for a very long time, promoted women in the workplace, and from a very grassroots level. We sat down, the founder of the company, Donna Carpenter, sat down years ago and said, what's it going to take to get more women in this room, in our directors' meetings, in our senior management team, and set out listening to the employees to make sure we're a place, an employment place of choice for women. We do the same thing with the environment. There was a time when we couldn't have said we were doing sustainable practices in our manufacturing, whether that was in the US or Europe or in Asia. And now we're very proud of what we did along this journey of getting to know what sustainability meant to us and how we could make the manufacturing processes and everything else we do a better place. And we, like I mentioned, traditions and rituals. We have so many things that are ingrained in what we do that are not just about snowboarding and partying, but a lot of other things that are meaningful to our employees, and we want to talk about that. So we think by just opening the doors a little bit to our culture and really being authentic to who we are, we can be appealing to a broader group of future employees and hopefully future customers as well.
And to be clear, when I said white people, no, I meant maybe that's not the place for me. I don't dislike white people. Just be clear about that. Yeah, I'm sure somebody's tweeting out Danny Robinson saying he doesn't like white people.
We don't actually have a lot of people.
Okay.
I mean, we have
That's true.
too few people where we live.
That's it. Perry, your definition of culture, or Red Bull Media's definition of culture, may be a little bit different. You want to talk about what culture is and how you describe it at Red Bull?
Yeah. So for this week and next week, and so culture for us is music, art, dance, gaming, sports, events. So we look at how we live in the world. So like I was in Chicago last week at an event called Conquest, which is around gaming culture and how we talk and interact with that group of people is very different than how we interact with like this week, which is Red Bull Festival, which is all about the arts. Next week is Red Bull Music Festival. It's all about music. And our audience, we actually take a very strong effort to communicate to all of them differently because they're all very different. So Crashed Ice, which is our sporting event in the wintertime, completely different audience. So we look at it as the people that consume the brand, we understand that they're not always going to be the same type of culture that we're trying to talk to. So the thing that I do love is that with the Red Bull Media House arm, we look at it from a very broad perspective and have a very focused effort on helping the audience that we're trying to talk to fully understand how Red Bull represents and understands and respects the culture that they live in and are part of, and how we enter into those spaces. We try to do it in the most relevant and authentic way possible, where there are events like I reference, like last year, Solange at the Guggenheim, that was a Red Bull music event. Who knew about that? No one, but you knew about the concert. Like, that is how we live in the world, and it's the most relevant way, where there are times where we actually take a step back and allow for the culture to step forward.
That's dope.
Yeah.
You're taking notes, right? All right. So I'm a fan of large animals. So I'm going to address the elephant in the room. It said that corporate culture is an organization's ability to acknowledge trust and fear. And the Martin Agency was in the news recently for not great reasons. Went through some culture shock with sexual harassment charges, and it really rocked the core of the company. Kristen wasn't at the agency yet. I was. But can you talk a little bit, because you came in after you took the shrapnel had spread and you came after. Can you talk a little bit about reassembling the culture of an agency after it goes through something as traumatic and as devastating as that was for us?
Yeah. I should first say it was never anything I have done before. So I think for many, probably women stepping into this role, but probably most people stepping into this role, Me Too is a relatively new movement, and so for those of us stepping in, it's a little bit of uncharted territory. There's so much I could tell you, and we only have like 5 minutes, so I can't even begin. But I will tell you, transparency was a big thing. I shared the numbers of the company with the company. I told them exactly where we were from a profit and margin and revenue standpoint. I told them exactly where I was. I spent a lot of time just trying to keep our clients. That was one of the first things I did, simultaneously trying to rebuild a system of transparency within the company. I wanted there to be a company with paying clients to support any future HR changes we had. But every time I went to a company, I sent a picture of me back to the staff. And I'd be like, here I am in the lobby of this place, usually doing something funny or corny. But I wanted them to know that where I was. I wanted them to know what I was doing, that there was nothing to hide. I stood up in front of the staff and I told them, that my mission and my ambition. And I also told them when I was afraid. I told them when I was nervous. I told them when I was a little bit scared. I told them when I was super excited. I spent a lot of time just saying progress over perfection. It's a mantra I said over and over, and actions over words. Progress over perfection, actions over words. I did not wait until things were perfect before we did them. We did them. I stood up and I said, this is what we're doing, and this is why I'm doing it, and if I'm wrong, I'll pivot. But we've got to move. We've got to do something. And I would hopefully, I think, win people along. And then there were moments I had last week where I created with the team of executive leaders, we created a number of changes in the company, and I stood up and I knew there were people thinking, what is she thinking? And so I acknowledged it and I said, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Just get in the boat anyway, right now. And if we find out we're taking on a lot of water and in like 6 months it's the bad decision, we'll pivot and we'll change. But I just need you right now, in the absence of knowing for sure that this is a bad decision, I'm going to ask you to assume it's a great decision and just get in the boat and row. And just trust that we won't continue at our own peril, right? So there are many moments like that, and the feedback I've gotten has usually been gratefulness for the transparency. I've also fed people. Like, I'll buy ice cream for the staff. And it's amazing. It's like my mom instincts kick in. But honestly, if you feed people, they are happy. And so I would advocate for a lot. So we had an EC moment last week, EC Executive Committee. It's our C-suite. And it was actually, we were promoting Danny as Chief Client Officer of our company, which we're announcing today in the press. So you guys are the first ones to kind of hear it. Yeah. I will say, and why these things are, you have no idea who Danny is, and you don't know how great he is, or how long he's been and how hard he's worked, and you don't know any of those things. What I will say, though, is there is something different about what's going on at the company. I'm the first female CEO in 53 years. I've hired our first female chief creative officer in 53 years. Danny is the first African-American in the C-suite in 53 years. I don't know where all this is going to go, but I do know it's going to be different. And so a lot of the staff, what I have to say, because it's a great culture and it's a great company, and not everything was broken. There were a handful of broken people, maybe, or broken situations, but the company itself was not broken. And so But my goal is not to go back to the way things were, but it's to take the values that made it a great place to be and take those values forward, but also change it. I don't want to just be better. I want to be the best at this. And so we're going to go from the back of the pack to leading the pack on what it means to come out of a Me Too movement and what it means from day 2 to day 300 to day 600. And I hope that people root for us along the way, because we're doing a lot of things that I know we haven't done before, but I think we're doing a lot of things the industry hasn't done before. So that's all exciting.
Final question, and then we'll take questions. Josée, do you need to know how to snowboard to work at Burton?
You do not, but
I
in
could
my
have worked
20
there.
years, you could work there. In my 20 years, we have a company ride day every March, around March 11th, and I hired a guy a few months ago. He was the only skier. And it was the first time I think somebody skied at our company ride day. So change is on the rise.
You're not going to train them?
Small change. No, I celebrated him.
Oh, good. I have to say, just one other thing. So I never met Josée before today, but I am a huge fan girl of their LinkedIn. I don't know if any of you follow Burton on LinkedIn, but they do such a phenomenal job of selling their culture over LinkedIn that that I've been just pining to get to speak with her and learn about their culture. So I would say for those companies, and I think Red Bull obviously lives their culture every single day, as Perry said. So I think for many of you, you have the tools at your disposal, because I think companies are getting better and better about pushing out their culture on LinkedIn, not just the products that they make or the jobs they have available, but why they are, who they are, and what they do. So anyway, I would encourage you to follow them both.
Thank you.
And show up at wherever Arts Festival.
Hey, Hype Williams is talking today, so
If you don't know who Hype Williams is, you should. Go look him up, and then show up at the AMC 25 Theater today at 7 o'clock.
it's sold out.
Okay, don't show up at the... See, that's how good it is. We have
For you, it's sold out.
2.5 minutes. Are there 3.5 questions? Yes.
To your first question about do you have culture written down, for the two that did, can you just give me like 3 bullet points of like what type of content is in there? 'Cause I think that's super interesting. We don't, but like what is written?
So the question is, for those who have culture written down, what are 2 or 3 of the points on that list?
I can actually hand you out. I brought a couple pictures of our stance, but yes, all right, perfect.
So we'll hand out the list. Is that a satisfactory answer for you?
It's literally Red Bull gives you wings, but when you walk in the building, there's a canoe that probably spans almost the whole place. They canoe it around Hawaii and do lava boating. It's amazing. And everyone that starts the company actually walks up and touches it to show their dedication. It's on screens, like literally blasting throughout the space of where it's everywhere. And it's refreshing because you're like, oh, the Red Bulletin, which is our magazine. Everything that big posters, our photography is out. We did an art walk, we did a film, and the company literally closed down so we could all go watch it. And we have a theater. Hint, hint. It's literally ingrained into the. It is like it pours out of the building.
So it's more involved in media and the
Yeah.
promotion of the media.
Yes.
And I would just say I don't have enough copies for everybody. So it's about our values and our commitments. They're written down. You know, it's about humility and agility and perseverance and things like that. But you also walk into our building and get a sense of who we are. So this was really just a fine tuning of, you know, what to look for when you're having a tough time with somebody or yourself.
It's also interesting, both of them talked about shutting down their companies to do something once or twice a year to celebrate, whether it's your ride day or the college.
Yeah.
So we need to close.
We close. We close on holidays. Yes.
My question is for the two clients here, because as someone who works with the vendor side,
Yes.
the relationship between clients and agencies directly impacts us. So we'd like to hear
So from the client's perspective,
I do too.
how do you have a successful relationship with your agency?
Red Bull Media House does not have an agency. So we do our work internally. To some degree, we have vendors that we work with, but the creativity comes from within the building. And then as head of partnerships, my role is sitting with agencies as well as other clients and coming back with an original concept or partnership that brings to life the best of. So we do work with agencies, but they're usually from another client side, and we bring them in and help them understand what Red Bull represents, and then come back with a creative output that's the best partnership of the two, like Stratos, GoPro, Red Bull. So those types of conversations. But we're open to talk to agencies. I come from the agency side, so that was not a short question. The answer was it.
We need a short answer
But
from Josée.
we do not work with an agency either. Go figure.
Short answer. Last question. Yes.
We're from Dentsu Tokyo, and we're one of the biggest, we are the biggest
Yes.
advertising agency
Yeah,
in
you
Japan. And there are 7,000 employees in our building. And we also, over the past years, had major scandals. We've had someone commit suicide from overworking, and a Me Too scandal as well. So we're going through a lot of changes.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's difficult for a huge company to create culture, and it seems like everyone in your employee loves the company. There's a lot of commitment. In our company, everyone kind of hates our company right now. But the only thing we're here because they pay us good money.
Yeah.
So.
From Dentsu Tokyo, 7,000 employees, very large company. It's gone through a couple of scandals. I assume the question is, well, I don't know what you're asking. The point is that a company of that size, it is obviously more difficult than a company of 300 people to figure out the culture and to have everybody rally around one thing. So I'm not sure if we can even answer how do you do it. I will say that there are, hip-hop's a culture. And within that culture, there are a lot of people who understand what the rules are, how to define it. They may have different opinions about it. This may be a bad example of an ability of some large organization or organism to kind of police itself and figure out what it means to be in the culture. I can't answer how to rally up.
I would just
That's
go
tough.
back to age-old branding, which is figure out your purpose, the company's purpose, your why. And you can watch Simon Sinek's TED Talk, which will explain that if you don't already know it. But I would figure out, I think, and then use that as a way to create a lighthouse identity for yourself so that everyone who walks in every day knows why why Dentsu is there and what Dentsu's point of view is on the world that is different from WPP's or different from IPG's or different from Havas, which is hard at a holding company level or at an agency level. But you should have, I suspect there is something written down already. But the only other thing I'll add is IDEO has a point of view, and I don't know if they still hold to it, but that when groups get past 150 people, things tend to get lost. So it might be that you divvy things up into teams of 150 people or smaller, and you create cultures within the company that don't conflict with the Uber mission of the company, but help make it real for the 150 people maybe that you're closest to. So it could be that, I don't know if you work on one team, on one account. I don't know what account you would work, what account do you work on? Yeah.
Zespri.
Okay, so maybe there's a Zespri team point of view within Dentsu, and you could make that work environment for your team feel real and human and worth coming in every day for.
I'm going to come and cut everyone off. It's got to start from the top, though. That we know. We are out of time.
Thank you.
Thank you all for
Thank you.
attending. Thank you, panelists.